Lucinda Landon's knees hit the rough wooden floor of Hamilton's auction block, her wrists bound tight with coarse rope that bit into her skin. The Arizona Territory sun beat down mercilessly in the summer of 1878, casting harsh shadows across the faces of men who looked at her not as a person, but as property. 3 days ago, she had been the respected schoolteacher of this dusty frontier town. Now she was being sold to pay for a crime she hadn't committed. $500 for the schoolmarm, called out Sheriff Doyle, his voice carrying across the town square where curious onlookers had gathered. Educated, can read and write, good with children, strong back, 22 years old. A fair price for someone who's stolen from this good town. I didn't take anything, Lucinda said, her voice cracking from thirst and fear. Her once neat brown hair hung in tangled waves around her face, and her blue dress, her best, was stained with dust and tears. Please, there's been a mistake. The sheriff cuffed her across the ear, silencing her protests. $500. Do I hear 500, 300, called a gruff voice from the crowd. Lucinda recognized it as belonging to Frank Miller, the saloon owner who had made unwanted advances toward her since she'd arrived in Hamilton 6 months ago. His smile made her stomach turn. $350, came another voice, this one from Jeremiah Wade, the elderly rancher who had recently lost his wife and was known to be looking for a replacement. Lucinda closed her eyes, willing away the tears that threatened to spill. This couldn't be happening. Not in America, not in 1878. But frontier justice was swift and often cruel. When the town's funds had gone missing, money she'd been responsible for, as the teacher collecting for the new schoolhouse, all eyes had turned to her, the outsider from Boston. 400, Miller called again, his voice eager. 450, countered Wade. The bidding continued, and Lucinda felt herself growing faint. She hadn't eaten since yesterday, and the heat was oppressive. Just as she thought she might collapse, a new voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd. This is wrong. The words hung in the air, clear and firm. The crowd parted, revealing a tall man Lucinda had never seen before. He wore the dust of the trail on his clothes, but there was nothing weary about his stance. His dark hat shaded eyes that blazed with conviction, and his hand rested casually on the gun at his hip. He was perhaps 30, with shoulders broadened by hard work and a face weathered by sun and wind. "This ain't your business, stranger," Sheriff Doyle said, his hand moving to his own weapon. "This is Hamilton justice." "Justice?" The stranger took another step forward. "Selling a woman as punishment isn't justice, it's barbarism." "She stole from the school fund," someone called from the crowd. "Money for our children." The stranger's gaze never left Lucinda's face. "Did you do it?" He asked her directly. "No," she answered, her voice stronger than she expected. "I would never." He nodded once, as if that settled the matter. "You've done nothing wrong," he said, then turned to address the sheriff. "I'm buying her freedom." A murmur ran through the crowd. Sheriff Doyle laughed unpleasantly. "That's not how this works, Cowboy. She's been sentenced. The money goes to replace what was stolen. How much? $1,000. The stranger didn't hesitate. He reached into his saddlebag and pulled out a leather pouch. "Count it," he said, tossing it to the sheriff. Doyle caught it, his expression skeptical. He opened the pouch and began counting gold coins, his eyes widening slightly. When he finished, he looked up. "It's all here," he admitted reluctantly, then cut her loose. "Wait a minute." Frank Miller stepped forward, his face flushed with anger and whiskey. "I was bidding fair and square." "The lady isn't for sale," the stranger said quietly. "Not to you, not to anyone." Miller's hand twitched toward his gun. "Who the hell do you think you are?" "Name's Vaughn Zimmerman. I'm just passing through, but I don't hold with treating people like property." The name caused another ripple through the crowd. Lucinda saw recognition in some faces, followed by wariness. Whoever this Vaughn Zimmerman was, his reputation preceded him. Zimmerman. Sheriff Doyle's voice had lost some of its bluster. The ranger, former ranger, Vaughn corrected. Now I'm just a man who'd like to see that rope removed from the lady's wrists. After a tense moment, Doyle nodded to his deputy, who stepped forward reluctantly and cut Lucinda free. She rubbed her raw wrists, unable to believe what was happening. The stranger Vaughn extended a hand to help her to her feet. "Thank you," she whispered, her legs unsteady beneath her. "Don't thank me yet," he replied quietly. "We still need to get out of here alive." "You can't just take her," Sheriff Doyle protested. "The town council has its money," Vaughn interrupted. "More than was stolen, I'd wager. The lady is free to go where she pleases." "I want to leave," Lucinda said firmly, finding her voice again. "I have nothing here now," Vaughn nodded. "My horse is at the livery. Can you ride?" "Yes." "Then let's go." He kept his body between her and the crowd as they moved away from the auction block. Frank Miller watched them with naked hatred, but the presence of Vaughn's hand near his gun kept anyone from interfering. At the livery, Vaughn saddled a second horse. "This one's gentle," he told her. "She'll follow my lead." Lucinda gathered her skirts and mounted as best she could. Her hands were shaking. "Where are we going?" "Away from here," he said simply. "We can figure out the rest once we're clear of town." As they rode out of Hamilton, Lucinda felt the weight of stares on her back but didn't turn around. She had come west full of hope and ambition, wanting to help build this new territory by educating its children. Now she was leaving in disgrace, saved from slavery by a stranger's unexpected mercy. "They'll come after us," she said once the town was behind them and the vast Arizona landscape spread out before them. "Sheriff Doyle won't let this stand." "Probably not," Vaughn agreed, his eyes scanning the horizon, "but we'll have a head start." "Why did you do it?" she asked. "You don't know me." He was silent for a long moment, guiding his horse along a rocky trail that led toward distant mountains. Finally, he said, "I know what it's like to be judged unfairly, to have your fate decided by people who have already made up their minds about who you are." "You believed me," she said wonderingly. "When I said I didn't take the money." "Yes." "Why?" Vaughn turned slightly in his saddle to look at her, his expression softening slightly. "Your eyes," he said simply. "They're honest eyes." Lucinda felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear. "I don't even know where we're going," she realized aloud. "I've got a cabin," he replied, "in the Superstition Mountains. It's remote, but it's safe. You can stay there while we figure out how to clear your name." "Clear my name," she repeated in surprise. "Is that possible?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But I'm not in the habit of leaving a job half done. Someone stole that money, Miss Landon, and it wasn't you." "Lucinda," she said. "Please call me Lucinda," he nodded. "Lucinda, I'm Vaughn." As they rode deeper into the wilderness, Lucinda felt something she hadn't expected. Hope. She was still in danger, still falsely accused, still miles from anywhere familiar, but she was free. And she wasn't alone. The sun was beginning to set behind them, painting the desert in shades of gold and purple. Ahead, the mountains loomed, dark and mysterious. Lucinda didn't know what waited for her there, but whatever it was, it had to be better than what she'd left behind. Vaughn led them off the main trail just as twilight deepened into night. "We'll make camp here," he said, gesturing toward a cluster of rocks that would provide some shelter. "It's not safe to travel these paths in the dark, especially with pursuers likely behind us." Lucinda slid from her horse, her legs stiff and sore. She wasn't accustomed to riding long distances, and the day's events had left her exhausted. Still, she helped Vaughn gather wood for a small fire, grateful for the chance to move and stretch her aching muscles. You should eat something, Vaughn said, offering her jerky and hardtack from his saddlebag. The food's not much, but it's better than nothing. Thank you. She accepted it gratefully, realizing how hungry she was. As they sat beside the small fire, Lucinda studied her rescuer more carefully. In the flickering light, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, the set of his jaw that spoke of determination, perhaps even stubbornness. His hands were calloused but careful as he tended the fire. "How did you know," she asked, "in town, that I was being sold?" Vaughn looked up, his expression unreadable. "I heard talk in the saloon when I stopped for water. They said a thieving schoolteacher was getting what she deserved. And you came to stop it," she marveled. "You could have been killed." A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Wouldn't be the first time I've faced down trouble. The sheriff called you a ranger. I was Texas Ranger for 7 years. But not anymore." Something shadowed his eyes. "Not anymore." Lucinda sensed there was a story there but didn't press. They both had secrets, pasts that had shaped them. Perhaps in time they would share them. "Try to get some sleep," Vaughn said, changing the subject. "I'll keep watch. All night." "I don't need much sleep. Old habits." Lucinda wanted to argue but was too tired. She used her saddlebag as a pillow and wrapped herself in the blanket Vaughn offered. Despite her exhaustion, sleep eluded her for a time as her mind replayed the day's events. "Vaughn," she said softly. "Yes, thank you, not just for the rescue but for believing me." In the darkness, she couldn't see his expression, but his voice was gentle when he replied. "Get some rest, Lucinda. Tomorrow's a long ride." She slept eventually. The steady sounds of the desert night and Vaughn's quiet movements as he kept watch lulling her into a sense of security she hadn't felt in days. Dawn came with startling swiftness, the eastern sky blazing with color. Vaughn had coffee boiling over a small fire when Lucinda awoke, stiff and disoriented. "Morning," he said, handing her a tin cup. "We should move soon. Your friends from Hamilton might not be far behind." The coffee was strong and bitter, but it helped clear the fog from her mind. "How far is your cabin?" "Another day's ride if we push hard. The terrain gets rougher from here." They broke camp efficiently, Vaughn showing her how to pack the saddlebags for better balance. As they rode, Lucinda found herself watching him the way he sat easily in the saddle, the alertness in his posture, the occasional kind word he offered to his horse. He was a man comfortable with solitude but not unkind. "Tell me about Boston," he said unexpectedly as they navigated a narrow pass. "What made you leave it for a place like Hamilton?" The question surprised her. "How did you know I'm from Boston? Your accent, it's faint, but it's there." Lucinda smiled, impressed by his perception. "I wanted adventure, I suppose, and purpose. My father was a teacher and I always planned to follow in his footsteps. But after he died, there seemed nothing holding me to the city." "So you came west?" "Yes. The Arizona Territory Educational Society was recruiting teachers for frontier towns. The pay was good and the need was great." She sighed. "I thought I was doing something important, building the future." "You were," Vaughn said firmly. "Don't let what happened change that." "But it did change it," she replied. "Even if we could somehow prove my innocence, I can't go back to Hamilton. They were ready to sell me, Vaughn." Like I wasn't human. His expression darkened. "I know, and they'll answer for that." "How?" "There's no law out here but what men like Sheriff Doyle decide it is." "There's still justice," Vaughn said, his voice low and determined, "and I aim to see you get it." They rode in silence for a time, the landscape growing more rugged as they climbed higher into the mountains. Pines began to appear among the scrub, and the air grew cooler. Late in the afternoon, they stopped by a small stream to rest the horses and refill their canteens. Lucinda splashed water on her face, grateful for its coolness. When she looked up, she caught Vaughn watching her, an unreadable expression in his eyes. He quickly looked away. "We should reach the cabin before dark," he said, adjusting his horse's saddle. "There's a path up ahead that's not easy to spot if you don't know what to look for." "You come here often?" she asked, curious about this solitary man and his mountain refuge. "When I need peace," he replied. "Or when the world gets to be too much. And is it too much now?" Vaughn considered her question. The world's always too much in some ways, too cruel, too indifferent to suffering. He helped her mount her horse. "But sometimes it surprises you." "How so?" "By putting the right person in your path just when you need them." Lucinda wasn't sure if he meant her or himself, but the words warmed her nonetheless. The path Vaughn spoke of was indeed nearly invisible, a narrow track that wound between boulders and through dense stands of pine. The horses picked their way carefully, and Lucinda found herself holding her breath at particularly steep sections. "Almost there," Vaughn assured her as the sun began to sink toward the horizon. Finally, they emerged into a small clearing. Nestled against the mountainside stood a sturdy log cabin, its windows dark but intact, a small corral to one side. It wasn't large, but it looked solid and well-maintained. "It's lovely," Lucinda said, genuinely impressed. "Did you build it yourself?" "Most of it," Vaughn admitted. "Added to it over the years." He dismounted and helped her down from her horse. "Come on, let's get settled before dark." The interior of the cabin was simple but comfortable. A stone fireplace dominated one wall with a table and chairs nearby. A narrow bed stood in one corner and shelves lined another wall, holding books, tools, and supplies. "It's just the one room," Vaughn said, sounding almost apologetic. "You can take the bed, I'll sleep by the fire." Lucinda felt a blush rise to her cheeks but nodded. The propriety of their situation hadn't fully registered until this moment. Here she was, alone in a remote cabin with a man she barely knew. In Boston, it would have been a scandal beyond recovery. But this wasn't Boston, and conventional rules seemed less important than survival. "I'll start a fire," Vaughn said, moving to the hearth. "There's dried food in the cabinet there and water in the barrel. It's not much, but it's perfect," Lucinda interrupted. "After yesterday, this is a palace." He smiled then, a genuine smile that transformed his face and made her heart skip a beat. "Welcome to my palace, then." As night fell, they shared a simple meal of beans, dried beef, and coffee. Vaughn told her a little about the area, the hunting, the weather, the few neighbors scattered miles apart. He didn't mention his past, and she didn't ask. It was enough for now to be safe and warm. "Tomorrow," he said as they finished eating, "we should talk about what happened in Hamilton. The money that went missing. Who might have wanted to frame you?" Lucinda stared into the fire, the memories of her arrest and humiliation still raw. "Yes," she agreed quietly. "Tomorrow." She slept deeply that night, exhaustion overcoming her fear and uncertainty. When she woke, sunlight was streaming through the cabin's small windows, and the smell of coffee filled the air. Vaughn was outside, tending to the horses. Lucinda took the opportunity to wash her face and hands in a basin of water he'd left for her. Her dress was wrinkled and dirty, a sad reminder of her ordeal. She smoothed it as best she could and pinned her hair back neatly, wanting to reclaim some sense of dignity. "Morning," Vaughn said when she stepped outside. "Sleep well." "Better than I expected," she admitted. "Your bed is comfortable." "Good." He handed her a cup of coffee. "I've been thinking about Hamilton." "So have I." They sat on the cabin's small porch, the morning sun warming the air around them. The view from the mountain was breathtaking, miles of wilderness stretching toward the horizon, untouched and free. "The money that went missing," Vaughn began. "Tell me everything you know about it." Lucinda sighed, gathering her thoughts. "It was for the new schoolhouse." The old one was falling apart, and the town council had finally approved funds for a replacement. As the teacher, I was responsible for collecting donations to supplement the town's contribution. How much was missing? $800. A fortune out here. Vaughn whistled low. And they thought you took it. The money was kept in a lockbox in my desk at the school. I was the only one with a key. She shook her head. Except that wasn't true. I discovered the town clerk, Mr. Henderson, also had a key. He said it was standard procedure, but I never knew about it until after the money was gone. Henderson, Vaughn repeated thoughtfully. Tell me about him. Arthur Henderson. He's been the town clerk for years. A respectable man, everyone says. Wife, children, goes to church on Sundays. Lucinda frowned. But there was something. When the money was discovered missing, he was the first to accuse me, before anyone even knew for certain it was gone. Interesting, Vaughn murmured. Anyone else who had access to the school, the caretaker, old Tom. But he's nearly blind and devoted to the children. I can't imagine him stealing. What about Sheriff Doyle? What's his connection to Henderson? Lucinda considered this. They're friends, I think. They play cards at the saloon on Saturday nights, and a memory surfaced. A week before the money disappeared, I overheard them arguing behind the general store. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but Henderson seemed upset. Vaughn's expression sharpened. That might be significant. Anyone else in town who might have wanted to hurt you. Or who stood to gain from the schoolhouse not being built. Lucinda's cheeks flushed. Frank Miller, the saloon owner, he made advances. I rejected him rather publicly a month ago. The one who was bidding for you, Vaughn said, his voice hardening. Yes. He owns the building where school is currently held. If a new schoolhouse were built, he'd lose the rent the town pays him. So we have Henderson, who had a key and was quick to accuse you, Doyle, who's friends with Henderson and seemed eager to sell you, and Miller, who had both personal and financial motives. Vaughn set down his coffee cup. That's where we start. Start? Lucinda looked at him in confusion. Start what? Finding evidence to clear your name. But how? We can't go back to Hamilton. They'll arrest me again or worse, arrest you for interfering. Vaughn's smile was confident, almost predatory. There are ways of gathering information without being seen. I didn't spend 7 years as a ranger without learning a few tricks. You're serious about this, Lucinda realized. You really want to help me clear my name. I am, he confirmed. And not just because it's right. There's something about you, Lucinda Landon. Something that makes me want to fight for you. The way he said it, direct and without artifice, made her breath catch. There was admiration in his eyes, perhaps even something more. In the short time they'd known each other, a connection had formed between them born of crisis, yes, but growing into something neither had anticipated. Thank you, she said softly. I don't know what I did to deserve your help, but I'm grateful for it. You don't have to deserve kindness, he replied, though you do deserve justice, and we're going to get it for you. As they sat on the porch, planning their next steps, Lucinda felt a shift in her perception of Vaughn Zimmerman. He wasn't just her rescuer now, or even a temporary protector. He was becoming something more, a partner, perhaps even a friend. And the flutter she felt when he looked at her suggested the possibility of something deeper still. For the first time since her arrest, Lucinda allowed herself to hope. Not just for vindication, but for a future that might hold more than survival. A future that might include the quiet, determined man beside her. The next few days established a routine at the cabin. Vaughn taught Lucinda about mountain life, how to identify edible plants, how to move quietly through the forest, how to shoot the small revolver he insisted she carry. In return, she helped with cooking and mending, using skills she'd learned in Boston but rarely needed in Hamilton. You're a quick study, Vaughn remarked as she successfully hit a target he'd set up 50 yards from the cabin. Most people take longer to get comfortable with a gun. I had a good teacher, she replied, lowering the weapon carefully. Though I hope I never have to use it. So do I. He took the revolver, checking that it was unloaded before tucking it into his belt. But it's better to have the skill and not need it than the reverse. They walked back to the cabin together, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows through the trees. Lucinda found herself studying Vaughn's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the slight crease between his brows when he was thinking. In their time together, she'd learned he was a man of few words but deep convictions, someone who valued justice and honesty above all. "Tomorrow," he said as they reached the clearing, "I'm going into town." "Hamilton?" she asked, alarmed. "No, Prescott. It's larger, more established. I have contacts there who might help us understand what happened in Hamilton." Relief flooded through her, followed by anxiety. "How long will you be gone?" 2 days, maybe 3. He looked at her with concern. "Will you be all right here alone?" "Yes," she said, more confidently than she felt. "You've shown me everything I need to know, and no one knows about this place. Keep the gun close," he advised. "And stay near the cabin. There's plenty of food and water." That night, as they sat before the fire, Lucinda found herself dreading Vaughn's departure. Not just because of the danger she might face alone, but because she'd grown accustomed to his presence, the sound of his voice, his quiet strength, the way he looked at her when he thought she wouldn't notice. "Vaughn," she said suddenly, "tell me about being a ranger. Why did you leave?" He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he set down the knife he'd been sharpening and looked at her directly. "There was a case," he began, his voice low. "A wealthy rancher's son killed a Mexican family over a water dispute. The evidence was clear, but the local judge was in the rancher's pocket. They wanted me to testify that it was self-defense." His hands clenched into fists. "It wasn't. I'd seen the bodies, woman, children, shot in the back." Lucinda felt sick. "What did you do?" "I told the truth." "The son was acquitted anyway." Bitterness colored his words. "The rancher had too much influence. But he wasn't satisfied with the acquittal. He wanted me punished for crossing him." "How?" "False charges. Witnesses who claimed I'd taken bribes, abused my authority. My superiors believed him, not me, or pretended to anyway." Vaughn looked into the fire. "I left before they could strip me of my badge, came out here where a man can live by his own code." "I'm sorry," Lucinda said softly. "It's not right." "No, it's not." He looked at her with unexpected intensity. "That's why what happened to you matters so much to me. I've seen what happens when power corrupts justice. I won't let it happen again, not to you." The conviction in his voice moved her deeply. On impulse, she reached out and took his hand. His skin was warm and rough against hers, and for a moment neither of them spoke. "We should get some rest," Vaughn said finally, his voice slightly hoarse. "Early start tomorrow." Lucinda nodded and reluctantly withdrew her hand. As she prepared for bed, she wondered at the feeling that had passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared wounds and similar values. Or perhaps something more personal, a connection that transcended their circumstances. Morning came too soon. Vaughn was already packed and ready to leave when Lucinda awoke. He'd prepared breakfast and left extra firewood stacked beside the hearth. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he promised as he mounted his horse. "Stay safe." "You too," she replied, suddenly anxious. "Be careful in town." He nodded, his expression softening. "I will." Then, with a final look that lingered longer than necessary, he rode away down the hidden trail. The cabin felt immediately emptier without him. Lucinda busied herself with chores, cleaning, organizing the few possessions she'd brought with her, reading from Vaughn's small collection of books. But the hours dragged, and she found her thoughts repeatedly returning to him. Was he safe? Had he reached Prescott? What would he discover there? The first day passed slowly. The second day, a thunderstorm rolled through the mountains, the rain drumming on the cabin roof and lightning illuminating the interior in brief, brilliant flashes. Lucinda sat by the fire, the revolver within reach, and told herself the unease she felt was just concern for a friend. But she knew it was more than that. In the short time she'd known Vaughn Zimmerman, he had become important to her in ways she hadn't expected. His absence left a space that hadn't existed before his arrival in her life. On the morning of the third day, she was collecting water from the stream when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Grabbing the revolver from her pocket, she hurried back to the cabin and positioned herself behind the door, heart racing. "Lucinda," Vaughn's familiar voice called. "It's me." Relief flooded through her. She threw open the door to find him dismounting, looking tired but unharmed. Without thinking, she rushed forward and embraced him. "You're back," she breathed, suddenly aware of how close they were. Vaughn seemed surprised by her greeting but didn't pull away. His arms came around her tentatively. "I'm back," he confirmed, his voice warm against her hair. Embarrassed by her impulsiveness, Lucinda stepped back. "I was worried," she explained. "The storm." "It was a bad one," he agreed, leading his horse toward the corral. "But I've got news that made the trip worthwhile." Inside the cabin, Vaughn unpacked his saddlebags while Lucinda prepared coffee. He seemed energized despite his weariness, his movements quick and purposeful. "Henderson," he said without preamble, "has been gambling heavily in Prescott, losing mostly." Lucinda looked up sharply. "The town clerk." "The same, and not just small stakes. He's into a man named Larson for nearly $1,000. "The missing money," Lucinda breathed. "You think he took it to pay his debts? It fits," Vaughn said, accepting the coffee she offered. "But there's more. Larson isn't just any gambler. He's connected to Frank Miller, their business partners in a few ventures, including a new saloon they're planning to open in Tucson. And Miller was the one bidding for me," Lucinda said, the pieces falling into place. "But why frame me? Why not just take the money?" "Because Henderson needed a scapegoat. You were perfect new in town, no family connections, responsible for the lockbox, and Miller had his own reasons to want you disgraced." Lucinda felt sick. "So they worked together. Henderson stole the money and Miller made sure I was blamed." "With Sheriff Doyle's help," Vaughn added. "My contact in Prescott says Doyle owes Miller money too. The sheriff's salary isn't much and he's got expensive tastes." "This is all speculation," Lucinda pointed out, though she believed it. "We don't have proof." Vaughn smiled, a predatory gleam in his eyes. "Not yet, but we will." "How?" "Henderson keeps a ledger," he explained. "Personal accounts separate from the town records. My contact saw it once when Henderson was drunk and careless. If that ledger shows unusual payments around the time the money went missing." "It would be evidence," Lucinda finished. "But how do we get it? We can't just walk into Hamilton and ask for it." "No," Vaughn agreed, "but we can go when most of the town is elsewhere." "When would that be?" "The county fair starts next week in Mesa Creek. 3 days of festivities and Hamilton will be practically deserted." He leaned forward, his expression intent. "It's our chance, Lucinda, to clear your name and bring Henderson, Miller, and Doyle to justice." The plan was risky, but Lucinda couldn't see another option. If they did nothing, she would remain falsely accused, unable to return to teaching or to show her face in any established community. Her reputation, her life would be destroyed. "I'll go with you," she decided. "It's my future at stake." "I should be there." Vaughn looked as though he wanted to argue but nodded instead. "We'll need to be careful, disguise you somehow." "I can cut my hair," she offered. "Dress as a boy, perhaps. The idea clearly made Vaughn uncomfortable, but he acknowledged its practicality. It might work. We'll need to get you different clothes. They spent the next few days preparing. Vaughn taught Lucinda more about handling the revolver, insisting she practice until her aim was steady and sure. They discussed every detail of the plan: how they would enter town, where they would look for the ledger, what they would do if discovered. Throughout these preparations, Lucinda was acutely aware of the growing tension between them. Not conflict, but something else, a current of unspoken feelings that manifested in lingering glances, in fingers that brushed when passing objects, in conversations that trailed into comfortable silence. The night before they were to leave for Hamilton, they sat outside the cabin watching the stars emerge. The air was cool but not cold, and a gentle breeze carried the scent of pine. "Are you afraid?" Vaughn asked quietly. "Yes," Lucinda admitted, "but not as much as I was before I met you." He turned to look at her, his expression serious in the fading light. "Whatever happens tomorrow, I want you to know something." "What?" "Meeting you, helping you, it's given me back something I thought I'd lost." His voice was low, almost hesitant. "A sense of purpose. Of doing what's right, not just what's easy." Lucinda felt a warmth spread through her chest. "You've done the same for me, given me hope when I had none." They were close, their shoulders nearly touching. Vaughn's hand found hers in the growing darkness, his fingers intertwining with her own. "Lucinda," he began, then stopped, seemingly at a loss for words. She turned to face him, her heart racing. "Yes." Instead of speaking, he leaned forward and kissed her gently, questioningly, as if asking permission. Lucinda answered by returning the kiss, her free hand coming up to rest against his chest. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing quickly. Vaughn's eyes searched her face, and whatever he saw there made him smile, a real smile that transformed his features and made him look younger, unburdened. "I didn't plan this," he said softly, "finding you, feeling this way." "Neither did I," she replied, "but I'm glad it happened." He brought her hand to his lips. "So am I." They stayed outside a while longer, talking quietly about small, everyday things: favorite books, childhood memories, places they'd seen. It was a moment of normalcy in what had been an extraordinary series of events, and Lucinda cherished it all the more for its simplicity. When they finally went inside, there was a new awareness between them, a shift in their relationship that both acknowledged without words. Vaughn still slept by the fire, and Lucinda in the bed, but the space between them no longer felt like a necessary barrier but a temporary arrangement. Morning brought focus and determination. They ate a hearty breakfast, packed supplies, and readied themselves for the journey to Hamilton. Lucinda had cut her hair short the night before, and now Vaughn helped her bind her chest with strips of cloth before she donned the boy's clothing he'd acquired in Prescott. "How do I look?" she asked, adjusting the cap that hid what remained of her hair. Vaughn studied her critically. "Like a young man at first glance. Keep your head down and your voice low, and most folks won't look twice." They left the cabin secure, taking only what they needed. The ride to Hamilton would take most of the day, and they planned to arrive after dark, when the streets would be emptiest. As they rode, Lucinda thought about what success would mean. If they found evidence of Henderson's guilt, she could be vindicated. But what then? Her life in Hamilton was over, the trust broken, the memories tainted. She couldn't go back to teaching there, even if cleared of wrongdoing. And what of Vaughn? Would he return to his solitary existence in the mountains once justice was done? The thought made her chest tighten uncomfortably. "What are you thinking?" Vaughn asked, noticing her silence. "About after," she admitted. "If we succeed," he nodded, understanding her concern. "One step at a time. First we clear your name, then we decide what comes next." Together, she asked, the word holding more meaning than she'd intended. Vaughn's expression softened. If that's what you want. It is, she said simply. His smile was answer enough. They reached the outskirts of Hamilton just as dusk was falling. The town looked much as Lucinda remembered it, a main street lined with wooden buildings, a few side streets with modest homes, the schoolhouse standing slightly apart. But seeing it now, knowing what had almost happened to her there, gave her a chill. The clerk's office will be in the town hall, she told Vaughn, keeping her voice low as they tied their horses in a grove of trees outside town. Henderson likely keeps the ledger there. And if not, we try his home, Vaughn agreed. Stay close to me. If anything goes wrong, we ride hard and don't look back. As predicted, the town was quiet. Lanterns burned in the saloon and a few homes, but the streets were empty. Most of Hamilton's residents had indeed gone to the county fair, leaving only those too old, too young, or too committed to their vices behind. They moved quickly through the shadows toward the town hall, a two-story building that housed various municipal offices. The door was locked, but Vaughn produced a set of slender tools from his pocket and had it open in moments. "Ranger skills," Lucinda whispered. "Something like that," he replied with a wry smile. Inside, they lit a small lamp, keeping the flame low. The clerk's office was easy to find, a tidy room with a desk, filing cabinets, and shelves of record books. Vaughn began searching methodically through the desk drawers while Lucinda examined the shelves. "Here," Vaughn said after several tense minutes. "Bottom drawer, hidden compartment." He held up a small leather-bound book. Opening it, they saw columns of figures, dates, and cryptic notations. Vaughn flipped through the pages until he found entries from 2 months ago, the time of the theft. "Look," he said, pointing to an entry marked simply L with the amount of $800 listed beside it. "And here, a payment to FM for $200 a week later." "Frank Miller," Lucinda breathed. "He got a cut. And here's another to D for $100. Vaughn's expression was grim. "Doyle's share for making sure you took the blame." "Would this be enough?" Lucinda asked. "To prove my innocence?" "With the right authorities, yes." Vaughn carefully tucked the ledger into his jacket. "The territorial marshal in Prescott is an honest man. He'd investigate." They were about to leave when a floorboard creaked in the hallway outside. Both froze, Vaughn's hand moving instinctively to his gun. The door swung open, revealing Sheriff Doyle, his own weapon already drawn. Behind him stood Frank Miller, his face flushed with anger or whiskey or both. "Well, well," Doyle said, his voice slurring slightly. "Look who's come back to visit, Zimmerman and his little thief." His eyes narrowed as he looked at Lucinda in her disguise. "Did you really think a haircut would fool anyone, Miss Landon?" Vaughn moved subtly, positioning himself between Lucinda and the two men. "We were just leaving, Sheriff, with evidence that clears Miss Landon's name and implicates you, Henderson, and Miller in theft and fraud." Miller snorted. "Evidence? What evidence? Your word against ours." "In this town, that's worth nothing." "Not my word," Vaughn replied calmly. "Henderson's ledger. Every transaction, every payoff, all written in his own hand." Doyle's expression flickered with uncertainty. "Give me that book, Zimmerman, now." "No," Vaughn's voice was steel. "Step aside, Sheriff. We're taking this to the territorial marshal." "Like hell you are." Miller lunged forward, grabbing for the ledger. What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Vaughn twisted away from Miller's grasp, his movement causing Doyle to fire reflexively. The shot went wide, splintering wood near Lucinda's head. Vaughn drew his own weapon, not firing but using its presence as a warning. "Don't," he said to Doyle. "You're drunk, your aim is off, and if you fire again I will shoot back, and I won't miss." The standoff lasted only seconds, but to Lucinda it felt like hours. Then, unexpectedly, a new voice joined the confrontation. "What's happening here?" Arthur Henderson stood in the doorway, his usually neat appearance disheveled. He looked at the scene before him, Doyle with his gun drawn, Miller red-faced and aggressive, Vaughn in a defensive stance, and Lucinda disguised but recognizable. "They've got your ledger, Art," Miller growled. "The private one." Henderson's face went pale. "That's not possible." "It's locked, not well enough," Vaughn said. "It's over, Henderson. We know you took the school money to pay gambling debts, framed Miss Landon, bribed these two to help you." Henderson's composure crumbled visibly. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he said, his voice barely audible. "Just the money, not selling her. That was Miller's idea." "Shut up, you fool," Miller snarled, but the damage was done. Doyle, seeing the situation deteriorating, made a decision based on self-preservation. He lowered his gun slightly. "I didn't know about the frame-up," he claimed, though no one believed him. "Miller and Henderson, they planned it all. You were happy enough to take your cut," Vaughn pointed out, "and to put Miss Landon on the auction block. The sheriff had no response to that." "Here's what's going to happen," Vaughn continued, his voice calm but authoritative. "We're leaving with this ledger. Tomorrow we'll be in Prescott with the territorial marshal. You three can either be long gone by then, or you can stay and face charges. Your choice." "You can't just walk out of here," Miller protested, though with less conviction than before. "Watch us." Vaughn gestured for Lucinda to move toward the door. "And if anyone follows us, I'll consider it a threat and respond accordingly." Henderson, broken by the exposure of his crimes, made no move to stop them. Doyle, motivated primarily by self-interest, seemed to be calculating his options. Only Miller looked ready to pursue the confrontation. "This isn't over, Zimmerman," he threatened. "Not for you or the thieving schoolmarm." "It is over," Vaughn corrected him. "You just don't know it yet." They backed out of the office, Vaughn keeping his gun trained on the three men until he and Lucinda reached the street. Then they ran for their horses, expecting at any moment to hear shouts or gunfire behind them. But there was only silence as they mounted and rode hard out of Hamilton, the stolen ledger secure in Vaughn's jacket. They didn't stop until they were miles away, the town long out of sight. Only then did they slow their pace, both breathing heavily from the tension and exertion. "Are you all right?" Vaughn asked, studying Lucinda's face in the moonlight. "Yes," she assured him, though her heart was still racing. "That was closer than I'd hoped." "But successful," he reminded her, patting the ledger. "We got what we came for." "What now?" Prescott. Vaughn nodded. "First light. It's too dangerous to travel these roads at night. We'll make camp and start fresh in the morning." They found a sheltered spot among some rocks and made a small, nearly smokeless fire. As the adrenaline of their escape faded, Lucinda began to process what had happened: the confrontation, Henderson's confession, the knowledge that her name could finally be cleared. "I still can't believe it worked," she said, accepting the coffee Vaughn offered. "That we actually found proof." "Justice isn't always so neat," he admitted. "We were lucky." "Not just lucky," she corrected him. "Brave, determined." She looked at him with undisguised admiration. "You were magnificent in there, Vaughn, the way you faced them down." He shrugged, uncomfortable with her praise. "I've had practice. Still." She moved closer to him, the firelight casting warm shadows across his features. "Thank you for everything." "You don't have to thank me," he said softly. "I know." She reached up to touch his face, her fingers tracing the line of his jaw. "But I want to." When she kissed him this time, there was no hesitation, no question. It was a kiss of gratitude, yes, but also of affection, of growing love, of shared triumph over adversity. Vaughn responded with equal fervor, his arms encircling her waist, drawing her closer. Lucinda, he murmured against her lips, when this is over, when your name is cleared. Yes, she prompted when he hesitated. Would you consider staying with me? The question contained vulnerability she'd rarely heard from him. I know my cabin isn't much and the life is hard, but yes, she interrupted, her heart full. Yes, I would consider it, more than consider it. His smile was brighter than the fire before them. I've been alone a long time, he confessed. Never thought I'd want anything else. Until you. I felt the same, she admitted. After what happened in Hamilton, I didn't trust anyone. Couldn't imagine letting anyone close. But you changed that, Vaughn. You showed me that goodness still exists in this world. They talked late into the night, making plans, sharing hopes, the ledger and its evidence temporarily forgotten in the joy of imagining a future together. When they finally slept, it was side by side beneath the stars, hands intertwined, the dangers of the past and present momentarily overshadowed by the promise of tomorrow. Morning found them refreshed and resolute. They broke camp early and rode toward Prescott, the ledger safely tucked away. The journey took most of the day, and the sun was setting when they finally reached the bustling territorial capital. Unlike Hamilton, Prescott was a proper city with brick buildings, gaslit streets, and a sense of permanence. The territorial marshal's office was easy to find, situated near the courthouse in the town center. Marshal James Cooper was a lean, gray-haired man with intelligent eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened carefully as Vaughn and Lucinda, now back in her own clothes, explained what had happened in Hamilton and presented Henderson's ledger as evidence. "This is serious business," Cooper said when they finished. "Theft, fraud, false imprisonment, attempted human trafficking. If what you're saying is true, these men belong behind bars." "It's all true," Lucinda assured him. "I was there. I lived it." Cooper studied the ledger again, flipping through its pages with a practiced eye. "This is compelling evidence," he acknowledged. "But we'll need more to make charges stick. Witnesses, corroborating testimony." "Henderson confessed," Vaughn pointed out, "in front of us and Doyle and Miller. That's a start." Cooper closed the ledger and looked at them thoughtfully. "I'll send deputies to Hamilton tomorrow. In the meantime, I suggest you two find a safe place to stay. If these men are as desperate as you say, they might come looking for you." "We will," Vaughn promised. Outside the marshal's office, they paused to consider their options. Prescott had several hotels, but Vaughn was hesitant to use one. "Too exposed," he explained. "Let's find somewhere quieter." They eventually secured rooms at a small boarding house on the outskirts of town, run by a widow who asked few questions and seemed impressed by Vaughn's manners and Lucinda's refined speech. "I've only the 2 rooms left," she told them apologetically. "One upstairs, one down." "That's fine," Vaughn assured her. "We'll take them both." The rooms were simple but clean, with comfortable beds and fresh linens. After days of travel and danger, such modest comforts seemed luxurious to Lucinda. "Get some rest," Vaughn told her as they parted for the night. "Tomorrow we'll see what the marshal has discovered," but sleep was elusive. Lucinda lay awake, her mind filled with the events of the past days, the escape from Hamilton, the confrontation in the clerk's office, Vaughn's unexpected proposal that she stay with him when this was over. So much had changed so quickly. A soft knock at her door startled her from her thoughts. She wrapped a shawl around her nightdress and opened it cautiously to find Vaughn standing there, looking as restless as she felt. "I couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Wanted to make sure you were all right." "I am," she assured him, "just thinking about everything, what happens next, us." She opened the door wider, inviting him in. He hesitated only briefly before entering, maintaining a respectful distance as she closed the door behind him. In the soft lamplight, his features were gentler than usual, the habitual wariness in his eyes replaced by something warmer. "I meant what I said," he told her, "about wanting you to stay with me, but I understand if you have other plans. You're educated, talented. You could teach anywhere." "I could," she agreed, moving closer to him, "but I don't want to be anywhere. I want to be with you." The simplicity of her declaration seemed to touch him deeply. "Are you sure? My life is uncomplicated, some might say lonely." "It wouldn't be lonely anymore," she pointed out, smiling, "not with both of us there." He reached for her then, drawing her into his arms with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "No," he agreed, "it wouldn't be lonely at all." Their kiss was different this time, slower, deeper, filled with promise and intent. Lucinda wound her arms around his neck, pressing herself closer to his solid warmth. All the fear and uncertainty of the past weeks seemed to dissolve in the security of his embrace. "Stay," she whispered against his lips. "Please stay with me tonight." His eyes searched hers, looking for any sign of doubt. Finding none, he nodded. "If you're sure." "I've never been more sure of anything." They came together in the narrow bed, their touches exploratory at first, then increasingly confident as they discovered what pleased each other. Vaughn was gentle but thorough, treating her body with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes. For her part, Lucinda abandoned the restraint that had been expected of her as a respectable woman, allowing herself to express the desire that had been building since their first meeting. Afterward, they lay tangled together in contented silence, Lucinda's head pillowed on Vaughn's chest, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "I never expected this," she murmured, drowsy with satisfaction. "When I came west, I thought adventure would be enough. And now—" He prompted, his voice a rumble beneath her ear. "Now I know that adventure is better when shared." She propped herself up to look at him, her hair falling in a curtain around them. "I love you, Vaughn Zimmerman. I know it's happened quickly, but I do." His expression softened in a way she'd never seen before, all barriers down, all defenses lowered. "And I love you, Lucinda Landon. Have since the moment you looked at me with those honest eyes and said you'd done nothing wrong." They slept deeply that night, wrapped in each other's arms, the dangers that still faced them temporarily forgotten in the newfound intimacy of their connection. Morning brought the sound of commotion from the street below. Vaughn was instantly alert, moving to the window to peer cautiously through the curtains. "What is it?" Lucinda asked, pulling on her nightdress. "Riders," he reported. "A lot of them, including Marshal Cooper." They dressed quickly and hurried downstairs to find Cooper dismounting in front of the boarding house, accompanied by several deputies. The marshal's expression was grim but satisfied. "Zimmerman," he called when he saw them. "Miss Landon, we've had developments." "What kind of developments?" Vaughn asked, instinctively positioning himself slightly in front of Lucinda. "Henderson is dead," Cooper said bluntly. "Shot by Miller last night when he threatened to confess everything." Lucinda gasped. "Dead? But he was alive when we left Hamilton." "According to witnesses, Miller, Doyle, and Henderson had a falling out after your departure. Words were exchanged, accusations made. When Henderson said he was going to turn himself in, Miller shot him right there in the saloon." "And Miller, Doyle," Vaughn's voice was tense. "Miller's in custody. My deputies apprehended him trying to leave town." Cooper's expression darkened. "Doyle got away, but we'll find him. He won't get far." The news was shocking but not entirely surprising. Men like Miller, cornered and desperate, often lashed out violently. And Doyle had always seemed the type to save his own skin first. "What happens now?" Lucinda asked. "Miller will stand trial for Henderson's murder and, with the evidence from the ledger and witness testimony, for the theft and fraud as well." Cooper looked at her with genuine sympathy. Your name will be cleared, Miss Landon. I'll see to that personally. Relief flooded through her. Thank you, Marshal. Don't thank me, Cooper replied gruffly. Thank Zimmerman here. Not many would have taken the risks he did for justice. Vaughn shook his head. I did what anyone should have done. But few would have, Cooper countered. Now I need you both to come back to my office. There are statements to be taken, paperwork to be completed. The next few days were a flurry of official activity. Lucinda and Vaughn gave detailed accounts of everything that had happened, from the initial theft accusation to their discovery of the ledger. More witnesses came forward from Hamilton, people who had suspected the truth, but been too afraid to speak against Henderson, Miller, and Doyle. Frank Miller was formally charged with murder, theft, fraud, and attempted human trafficking. Without his powerful friends to protect him, he faced the prospect of hanging. Sheriff Doyle was eventually captured trying to cross into Mexico and brought back to face similar charges. As for Lucinda, the territorial governor himself issued a formal apology for her treatment and offered her a teaching position in Prescott's expanding school system. It was a generous offer, with good pay and accommodations included. You should take it, Vaughn told her as they discussed it over dinner in a small restaurant near the courthouse. It's a great opportunity. Prescott is growing, becoming more civilized. You'd be comfortable here. Lucinda studied his face, noting the careful neutrality of his expression. Are you trying to talk me out of staying with you? No, he said quickly. Never that. I just want you to have choices. Real ones, not decisions made in the heat of danger and relief. She reached across the table to take his hand. My choice is you, Vaughn, if you still want me. The careful mask slipped, revealing the depth of his feelings. I do, more than anything. Then the governor's offer, generous as it is, isn't what I want. She squeezed his hand. Though I was thinking, there must be children near your cabin who need education. The nearest families are miles away, he said thoughtfully. But yes, there are children. No school, though. Perhaps there could be, she suggested. Not a formal one, but lessons a few days a week. I could ride to the different homesteads, or the children could come to us. Vaughn's eyes lit with understanding. You do that. Give up a proper school to teach a handful of frontier children. I would, she said simply, because teaching isn't just a job to me. It's a calling, and those children need education as much as any in Prescott. His smile was full of wonder. Have I told you today that I love you? Not since this morning, she teased. I think you're overdue. I love you, Lucinda Landon, he said, his voice low and fervent. And I think those mountain children would be lucky to have you as their teacher. 2 days later, with all official matters concluded and Lucinda's name fully cleared, they prepared to leave Prescott. Marshal Cooper saw them off, providing them with official documentation of Lucinda's innocence and the resolution of the case. Be careful out there, he advised as they mounted their horses. The territory's still wild in places. We will be, Vaughn assured him. Thank you for everything, Marshal. Just doing my job, Cooper replied with a slight smile. Unlike some lawmen I could name. The journey back to Vaughn's cabin, their cabin now, Lucinda thought with a surge of happiness, took several days. They traveled at a leisurely pace, enjoying the freedom of the open country and the privacy it afforded them. At night, they shared a bedroll beneath the stars, no longer pretending that propriety required separation. I've been thinking, Vaughn said on their final evening before reaching the cabin. The place could use some improvements if we're going to have students visiting. What kind of improvements? Lucinda asked, nestled against his side before the campfire. A proper table for lessons, more chairs, bookshelves. He kissed the top of her head, and maybe a second room for privacy. I'd like that, she admitted. though I've grown quite fond of our current sleeping arrangements." He chuckled, the sound rumbling pleasantly against her ear. "So have I, but I was thinking more of the future." Lucinda sat up to look at him. "The future?" Vaughn's expression was uncharacteristically shy. "Children. Our own, I mean. Someday. If you wanted that." The simple suggestion, the image it conjured of their life together, expanded to include children of their own, filled Lucinda with a joy so intense it almost hurt. "I want that very much," she said softly. "A family with you." He kissed her then, a kiss that held all the promise of the future they were building together. The next day, they arrived at the cabin as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in gold and crimson. It looked exactly as they had left it, yet different somehow, no longer just a refuge but a beginning. "Welcome home," Vaughn said as he helped her down from her horse. "Home," Lucinda repeated, savoring the word. "Yes, it is." In the weeks that followed, they settled into a new routine. Vaughn added a second room to the cabin, working with a skill and precision that impressed Lucinda. She, in turn, rode to the scattered homesteads in the area, introducing herself and offering to teach their children. The response was overwhelmingly positive. Many of these frontier families had worried about their children growing up without education. 3 days a week, students came to the cabin, sometimes just 2 or 3, sometimes as many as 8. Lucinda taught them reading, writing, arithmetic, and history, delighting in their progress and their unique perspectives. On the other days, she and Vaughn worked together to improve their home and its surroundings, adding a vegetable garden, expanding the corral, making the interior more comfortable. Vaughn's former solitude gave way gradually to a cautious sociability. The parents of Lucinda's students often stayed for coffee, sharing news and building connections. Slowly, they became part of a community, not a town, not even a settlement, but a loose network of independent people who nevertheless looked out for one another. 4 months after their return, on a crisp autumn morning with the mountains ablaze with fall colors, Vaughn asked Lucinda to marry him. He did it simply, without grand gestures or elaborate speeches, offering her a ring he'd had made by a silversmith in Prescott. "It doesn't have to change anything," he assured her. "We're already living as we choose, but I'd like to call you my wife if you'll have me." "Of course I'll have you," she replied, tears of happiness spilling down her cheeks. "I can't imagine my life without you in it." They were married 2 weeks later by a circuit riding preacher who happened through the area. The ceremony was small, just the two of them, and a few of their closest neighbors as witnesses, but perfect in its simplicity and sincerity. That night, as they lay together in the bed they now shared officially as husband and wife, Lucinda thought about the strange, terrible path that had led her to this happiness. If she hadn't been falsely accused, if she hadn't faced that awful auction block, if Vaughn hadn't happened to be passing through Hamilton that day. "What are you thinking about?" Vaughn asked, noticing her thoughtful expression. "How sometimes the worst moments of our lives can lead to the best," she replied. "If I hadn't been put up for sale like property, I never would have met you." He traced the line of her cheek gently. "I've thought the same. That day I almost didn't stop in Hamilton. Was low on supplies but thought I could make it to the next town." His eyes were serious in the lamplight. "Something made me stay. Call it fate or providence or just dumb luck, but I'll be grateful for it every day of my life." "So will I," she whispered, kissing him softly. "Every single day." Spring came to the mountains with a riot of wildflowers and new growth. The school lessons continued, with more students joining as word spread. Vaughn, who had initially kept his distance from the educational activities, began to participate occasionally, teaching the older boys about tracking, hunting, and survival skills that no book could provide. It was during this season of renewal that Lucinda discovered she was expecting their first child. The news brought a joy to Vaughn's face that she had never seen before, a pure, uncomplicated happiness that made him look younger and unburdened. "A baby," he marveled, his hand gentle on her still flat stomach. "Our baby. Due in the winter," she told him. "Just after Christmas, I think." He kissed her, then knelt to kiss her stomach, his usual reserve completely abandoned in his excitement. "Hello in there," he murmured. "Your mama and papa are waiting for you." Lucinda's pregnancy progressed smoothly through the summer and fall. She continued teaching until the first snows made travel difficult, by which time her condition was obvious. Their neighbors brought gifts for the baby: handmade blankets, tiny clothes, a beautifully carved cradle that Vaughn displayed proudly in their bedroom. As her time approached, an unexpected visitor arrived at their cabin: Marshall Cooper, now grayer but still sharp-eyed and direct. "Thought you'd want to know," he told them over coffee. "Frank Miller was hanged last month. Doyle got 20 years in territorial prison." "Justice," Vaughn said quietly. "Such as it is," Cooper agreed. "Won't bring Henderson back, but at least they paid for what they did." He nodded toward Lucinda's obvious pregnancy. "Life goes on, I see. Congratulations to you both." After he left, Lucinda found herself reflective. "It feels like the final chapter of that story," she told Vaughn. "Now we can truly begin our own." Their son was born on a cold, clear night in January, with the assistance of a neighboring farmer's wife who had experience as a midwife. He had Vaughn's dark hair and Lucinda's blue eyes, and they named him Samuel, after Lucinda's father. "He's perfect," Vaughn whispered, holding his son for the first time, his expression a mixture of awe and terror. "Absolutely perfect." Lucinda watched them together, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was her family, her husband, her child, her home. Built from the ashes of injustice and saved by the courage of a man who had been passing through. "I love you," she told Vaughn. "Both of you, more than I ever thought possible." "And we love you," he replied, sitting carefully beside her on the bed. "More than anything in this world." As baby Samuel slept peacefully between them, Lucinda thought about the journey that had brought them here from the auction block in Hamilton to this moment of perfect happiness. It had been a path of hardship and danger, but also of courage, justice, and ultimately, love. The years that followed brought more children: a daughter, Emma, born 2 years after Samuel, and another son, James, 2 years after that. The cabin expanded accordingly, with Vaughn adding rooms and improvements as their family grew. Lucinda's school also flourished, moving eventually to a small building constructed specifically for that purpose on their land, where children from miles around came to learn. Vaughn, once the solitary former ranger, became known throughout the region as a fair and honest man, someone who could be counted on in times of trouble. He never returned to formal law enforcement, but occasionally assisted the local authorities when his skills were needed. And Lucinda, who had once stood bound and humiliated on an auction block, became a respected teacher and beloved wife and mother. The injustice she had faced was not forgotten. She made sure her children understood that evil existed in the world, but also that good people stood against it, but it no longer defined her. On the 10th anniversary of their meeting, Vaughn surprised Lucinda with a gift: a small gold locket containing tiny portraits of their children. "To remind you," he said, as he fastened it around her neck, "that sometimes the darkest days lead to the brightest futures." "I don't need reminding," she replied, her eyes shining with happy tears. "I see it every day in you, in our children, in the life we've built together." He kissed her then, as tenderly as he had on their first night together. "And we're just getting started," he promised. "The best is yet to come." looking around at their home, at their children playing nearby, at the man who had saved her in every way a person could be saved. Lucinda knew it was true. The best was indeed yet to come, and they would meet it together, the schoolteacher and the cowboy who had seen her truth when no one else would.